Hi everyone, my name is Jean-Christophe. In this beginner Python tutorial, we will talk about Python control flows. In Python, the control flows are what define the order that the computer needs to execute statements, instructions, or function calls in a script. So this is one of the most important concepts in computer programming because it allows you to give rules and conditions to what your computer program should do. So these control flow statements are controlled by some of the conditional statements available in Python, such as the if, elif, else statement, the for loop, the while loop, and other conditional statements that we'll see in a minute. So these are used to write more complex code and program that are more dynamic so that you can answer different situations in different ways. So the first and probably the most important is the if else keywords that are used to apply condition in Python code. Why this is, to my mind, the most important thing in computer programming is because it allows you to say if something happens, then do something, and if something else happened, do something else, which is essentially the basic of computer programming, zeros and ones, yes, no's. So for example, you can say if true, say this is true. And if I run this, you'll see that it will run this is true. However, if it was if false, run this. And in this case, it's not false, so it doesn't print it. We can also give a condition if something is false. So for example, if I start with I equal 1, I could say if I is greater than 10, then print I is greater than 10. And otherwise, you could say else print I is not greater than 10. So in this case, if I is greater than 10, it will print the first line. Otherwise, it will print the next line. There is a third example and a third keyword that you can use in your if-elif statement, and is the elif here. So essentially, whenever you want to use the elif is when you want to create a new condition to be matched before moving to the next iteration. So if I have I equal 12 here, I could say, okay, if I is less than 2, then I could say print I is less than 2. Otherwise, I could say elif, and then I can put, instead of just putting a new else condition, just saying if it's false and do something, then I can say, okay, let's look at the second condition saying I if I is greater than 10. I is greater than 10. Otherwise, if none of these two conditions are true, then you could say else print I is a number between 2 and 10. So if I run this, I will say that, okay, I is greater than 10. So it is satisfied the second condition I gave it. So one of the super useful thing you can do in computer programming is repeating things, so you can loop over and over and over and over in order to automate some executions. So you can use a for loop statement in Python in order to iterate over a sequence, whether that sequence is a list, a tuple, a string. You can execute code for each of the item in the sequence. So for example, if you want to create a simple loop, you could use the for keyword, and then you say for item in, and you put in a sequence. Here I put in a list, and then I can say print item, and then I can say print hello, for example. So I can execute many lines of codes if I want for that sequence. So every single item, I'm printing the item, and then I'm printing hello item, hello, blah blah blah. There is a convention in Python here is that whenever you loop through a sequence that is made of an integer, you can use the I, so print I instead. There is another kind of loop you can use in Python, and this is the loop statement. So the while loop statement is used to execute code for as long as a given condition is true. So when we were using the for loop and giving it a box in which to iterate over, the while loop is more open and just says, as long as any condition you give it is true, then it will keep looping over and over and over and over. The simplest example of the while loop is the while true statement. So for as long as the condition is true, it will loop. So if I say print hello, Then it will print the hello infinitely since the condition is always true. So I need to stop the program from running here in order to prevent my computer program from crashing. If you don't want to do this, you could use a break statement. And the break will stop the loop early, so it will print only once. The alternative, not to make sure not to break code, you need to put some condition for the program to stop. So you could say I is equal 0. And you could say while I is less than 3, then print I. And then if I do this, it will keep printing I over and over. So if I run this, it will keep printing 0. So I need to increment the I. So I plus equal 1. So what will happen here is that it will print as long as the condition is true. And at this point, I was was equal 3, so it didn't print it. The next control flow I want to introduce is the break and continue statement. So we slightly view what the break was doing. It stopped the loop early. So here the break statement stopped the loop early, and the continue statement is used to skip to the next iteration in the loop. So one of the example of the break and continue statement that you could do is, for example, if you want to loop through each of these letters, you could create a for loop. So you could say for letter in letters. Then you could say print letter. So if I start with this, I will print each of the letter. However, I can put an if statement and say if the letter equals E, then break the loop. So here what will happen is instead of printing the letter E and F, it will have broke before printing it. I could make another condition, however. I could say if elif the letter equals C, then I could say continue. And this is where the continue statement comes in, because here I'm printing A, B, C, D. Now I'm just printing A, B, and D because the elif statement just said continue and keep running to the next iteration. Another keyword that is used as a control flow in Python is the pass statement, which defines a null operation to be used as a placeholder when the code should do nothing. One thing that computer programmers often use it for is whenever they want to prepare the structure of the code without actually writing it. So you're thinking of what your program should do. So for example, maybe your program should say count to 10, and it should also multiply things. So you know that your code will need to count to 10 and multiply things, for example. So you're just running this. You don't want to write these function instantly, so you run this and you got indentation error, and then you want to keep working on your code. You don't want that error to show all the time, so you could use a pass statement. So you're essentially creating a function without working on them right now. So it allows you to structure your mindset, structure your ideas, and run this. You could use it also in a loop. So for example, you could say for I uh, in 1, 2, 3, and then you don't know what it should do yet, so you could just say pass instead of doing whatever. So your code will do nothing, but you will have structured the idea behind of what you want to do. So the next control flow I want to introduce is the try and except statement. They are used to handle errors. So if you think your code might break at some point and get exceptions, then you can use a try except blocks. The try block contains a code that may return an exception. That if you think that code may have an error, then you put the except block to do something if the code breaks. So it essentially has this following structure: try and except. And one simple example of this is if you try to divide by 0. So you could say if 1 divided by 0, what will happen is you would get an exception, which is the 0 division error, because you cannot divide by 0. You could use a try statement here, and you could say except. So if the 1 divided by 0 breaks, you can say print you cannot divide by 0. So in this case, you're returning the print statement instead of breaking the code. You could have said 0 division error as well in order to be more precise in your code. You cannot divide by 0. And last but not least, in the Python control flow, there is the match statement. And the match statement is used to perform pattern matching. It was recently introduced by Python in one of the latest version. Um, and essentially it says, if the pattern match the expression, then the code is executed. So the example they gave in the Python documentation is with the HTTP error. So what they would do is they would say, okay, give me a status code and match the status. So they will try to match what you give it to whatever case statement that we have here. So if this is case 400, then return bad request. And then you can add other case statements. So case 44, return not found. So this provides you somehow like um, a good framework to start matching things more easily. So you can say 418 and then return I am a teapot. So all of these are known status code, and otherwise if it doesn't match, so if case and then you use the underscore here and then you return uh, this HTTP error was not matched. So essentially, if I say, okay, I want to run this and I give it 4, I would say, okay, well, okay, so here I want to run the 4 and print it, and otherwise I want to run a weird thing such as a 1000 HTTP error, and then I will run this. Then it would have matched every case statement and returned. So in this case, it would have returned the 44 not found, and in this case, this HTTP error was not matched. So help me and subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for my upcoming Python for SEO course. You can follow me on all these social media, and I gave you a link to subscribe for the Python SEO course waitlist in the comments. Thank you very much. See you next time.